Hi, everybody. I think you all know me. My name is Al Filreis. You will see that the chat function works really well. So feel free to put things in it. There'll be a point in my introductory comments when Andrew Beal or someone is going to put an important link in there. But feel free to use it. I am coming to you from my home, just 8 blocks from the Kelly Writers House. And sadly, I think we all feel a certain sadness about these things. I myself have only been to the Kelly Writers House, I think twice or three times since March. And this is my 20th, 25th, basically 25th year associated with the Kelly Writers House at Penn as the faculty director. And it just seems so odd that it's been so long because I love to just hang out at the Writers House. But let's face it, I'm in the position that most of you are in. You've one time or another made some kind of contact with the Kelly Writers House, but for the most part, you're far away. You're as far away as South Africa, Chicago, Los Angeles, the Netherlands. And so I'm in the same situation you are, which is I'm not at the Writers House, but I'm here to represent it. And I have some friends to do so. So I want us to take a couple of minutes just to say a few words and introduce the program. Then I'll describe what we're going to do in this program. And then I'll introduce the first of our readers. Each fall, usually in November, usually like the week after some kind of election, we meet in Soho, downtown Manhattan, at the Meisel Gallery of Susan and Lou Meisel. Been very generous for more than 2 decades to support an event which is every year always a fundraiser in a modest way, modest, unannoying, I think, non-annoying fundraiser. And we gather 100 people, 120 people at the Meisel Gallery. This year, Writers House New York, which is what that event is called, has become Writers House Everywhere, which means that some 100 people are able to join us, including, like the friends in Chicago, who I guess when Nina's been in New York, she's been able to come, but for her parents, not so easily. So there's always a good thing about this COVID ridiculousness. And that is that we can gather together in undreamt of ways. It's a strange time to be a writer's house. It's a strange time to be a haven for writers, especially one that has been long associated with its cozy, safe, warm, old home. We think of the Kelly Writers House as a place you come to, it's warm, there's a fire in the fireplace, there's somebody baking cookies. Well, we don't have that now. And it's a strange time for writers' organizations. Generally, I would say many, maybe most of them have shut down temporarily. Some have shut down permanently. And all of them just about have significantly slowed down their programming. But I'm here to say, and I'm not exactly sure why it is, and even if I knew why, it would be boring for you to hear me say it, but the Kelly Writers House, if anything, has accelerated and intensified its programming. I think we all know that now more than ever, these kinds of conversations about art and about literature and the life of the artist and the life of the writer, they're more urgent than ever. And the Writers House, because for one reason or another, has long been really good at the tech, really good at live streaming our events, really good at proving to everyone, even in the early years of the internet when people were skeptical, that online learning, that online conversation, that online explorations need not be impersonal, that we should not assume that going online means less contact, means less intimacy. So we have maintained our commitment to our programming. We have maintained our already online course that reaches people worldwide called ModPo, which we've been doing since 2012. This year, 52,000 people enrolled in ModPo from 171 countries around the world. It's so heartening and so remarkable and so personally exhilarating for me to have spent 10 weeks with lots of colleagues convening people across generations, across linguistic cultures, across racial and gender identities, across religions, and of course, across all kinds of political problems, to be able to speak a common language, the language of poetry, just remarkable. And many people who are here tonight have touched ModPo in one way or other. We have not let up on our commitment to our internship programs. We call it Real Arts. We've not stinted. Somehow, Mingo Reynolds, RJ Bernaco, and the rest of the folks, there's Mingo. Wow, Zach, there's Mingo. And Mingo and RJ have somehow maintained contact. And there's RJ, my goodness, people come and go around here so quickly. They have maintained a commitment to supporting students by setting up internships in the cleverest, most magical of ways. And they did it on the fly for the summer of 2020, and they're going to do it in a less on the fly, but no less heart-filled way for the summer of 2021. So thank you guys. Wave to your friends. Real Arts. Nor have we let up on our goal of recruiting students from around the US, but also around the world. And Jamie Lee JOSSELYN, whom pretty much, hey, Jamie Lee, pretty much every one of you knows Jamie Lee, who has devoted her time for the past bunch of years to going to typically far-flung and typically underserved schools that don't typically feed, pardon the phrase, feed the undergraduate population, pipeline the undergraduate population of the University of Pennsylvania. And Jamie Lee has figured out how to do it in a time of COVID, and I dare say has done it just as successfully as ever. And I'm glad that you're gonna, as part of our program, you're gonna get to meet Jamie Lee again. So Jamie Lee, thank you. And nor have we stinted on any of our support of students. I keep pointing out the Friends of Chicago, but we've had our friends, it's such a great name for a program, our Friends Fellows, students who benefit from term time fellowships and internships. I have been at Penn for 35 years now. I know you're supposed to all put into the chat, no way, Al, no way you're that old. Come on, I'm waiting to see the chat start to light up with people telling me, no, thank you, Jamie Lee. Sophie, all my ringers are saying it. Where's the rest of the real audience? 35 years. Okay, thanks. Thank you. Oh, there it's coming now. 35 years at Penn and 25 years at the Kelly Writers House. And I have met so many amazing people who with me believe that a crazy idea like this one, the Kelly Writers House, can make a mark at this famous, Ben Franklin's famous pre-professional university. Its pre-professionalism, I totally respect, or let's just say I totally respect the students who come out of those parts of the university. But now I think partly because of what the Writers House has done in the last 25 years, we have put on the map the possibility of studying the arts, of studying non-linear thinking, the non-linear thinking of writers like Emily Dickinson, and then going forward with that way of thinking out of the box, as it were. And I think that Writers House has made an impact. So tonight's program, and many of you have already participated in this, tonight's program is in part a fundraiser for this aspect of the program that Jamie Lee has been leading, our goal of recruiting students. So we have a student recruitment fund to make a donation to that fund. Most of you have done that already, but if you haven't, Andrew Beal is just about to put a link. He's done it. There's a link in the chat. So if you want to donate to the student recruitment fund, and I'm sure when Jamie Lee takes the floor, she will say a little something about what she is able to do with that fund. But in short, what I've seen in my 25 years at the Writers House is an increasing geographical and economic diversity of students from diverse backgrounds coming to the University of Pennsylvania, partly because of the Writers House. And it has been a great honor to be part of that change. So some of you are here tonight because you are anxious applicants. And I'm not going to put too many of you on the spot because you've applied to Penn and now you're sitting around waiting. But there are probably 6 or 8 people here who have been applicants. And I know that Daniel Biro is here, and you're actually going to see Daniel later if he's willing to participate in the close reading of our poem. And there's also Thanashi Mangua. I wonder if Thanashi, you would unmute yourself and say hello, and I think Zach might be able to highlight you. We didn't practice this, so I don't know if this is going to work. But are you out there, Thanashi? Ah, he says his audio is not working. Okay, I said Thanashi. I think it's you prefer Tinashi. And so you're in, but hi, he says in the chat. You're in Johannesburg, and that, and you have applied, I believe, early decision, and that says so much about our reach and about the interests of the Writers House. Some of you are here because you are the parents of current students. Judy Norman, for instance, who is joining us from Phnom Penh, who's also, I hope, got a strong enough connection to be able to participate in our close reading later. Geraldine Lucas is here, Sky's mom, and Sandy Stanger. Sandy, if you're around, will you unmute yourself and say hello, and maybe
you too. And Ariel, don't forget. Hi, everyone.
There you are. Okay, so Sandy and Ariel. So you're here partly because you are the parent of a first-year student, Ariel, who is in my class. Yes, that was good. But Sandy's here. It's double trouble because Sandy was my student. We won't say when.
Right. I'm not that old either.
But you were my student decades ago. Let's just say that.
Yes.
And these guys, these poor people had to go through. So one of Ariel's assignments in our poetry class this semester was to go home for Thanksgiving. Well, she was already home, and submit her poor parents to collaborative close reading of a poem. And I understand that Rabbi Dad didn't try to take over too much. Didn't make a sermon.
He's waving his hand. Just a little bit.
He's waving his hand. The rabbi has to get his hand.
Side of the computer.
Thank you guys. Glad you're here. And Karen and Alan Nadell and others, many parents of current students. Or you're here because you were my former student, primarily. Lucy O'Cook coming to us from Vancouver tonight. Mark Sherman from Connecticut. Ellen Umansky, a wonderful novelist. Umansky, Google her. Ellen Umansky, read her novel. Jason Resnick, I saw a little earlier from, I believe, Los Angeles. And Eric Carlin, who spent most of his 4 years at Penn sitting on the green couch at the Writers House. I'm so glad to see you all. Some of you are here because you're the parents of my former students. I mentioned the Friend family, Bill and Linda and Nina in Chicago, Darby, Levin, and Mom, Robbie. Some of you are here because you joined ModPo and you have no other connection to Penn or to the Writers House except ModPo. Nadia Gent from Rochester, who's been involved with ModPo since the beginning, I believe. Eleni Litt, who used to work at Penn and found ModPo. And Scott and Roger, a wonderful couple from Madison, Wisconsin, who found us, who are not otherwise connected. Penn, it's very gratifying for me. Some of you are here because you're members of the Writers House Board. Erwin Applebaum, Leslie Dazer Salmon, Molly Kinberg, Rob Friedman, and maybe a couple of other people. Thank you all, by the way, those people, for your help. And some of you are here because you're not Penn alumni and you're not otherwise connected to Penn, but you are people who have wanted to support innovative writers and writing. That's it. You found the Writers House because you believe in the mission of supporting writers when they're young. And a perfect example, and I believe she's joined us tonight, is Marjorie Perloff. Marjorie, if you can hear my voice, would you unmute yourself and say hello? And if not, I'll just continue to shout out to you.
Hello.
Oh, there's Hey, Marjorie. Oh, my goodness. Marjorie's going to come back at the end. Are you able to stay for the close reading? I think so.
Yes.
Okay. So Marjorie is a dear friend, and sorry to embarrass you, but the most eminent working poetry critic that we have. She is at her home. She didn't like that phrase, but it's true. She is at her home in Los Angeles. And Marjorie found the Writers House not because she's affiliated with Penn, although her husband worked at Penn years ago, but because she thinks it's valuable to find writers young and to take care of them and give them a chance to meet eminent writers. And Marjorie has supported us every year since we existed. So thank you, Marjorie. And I'm excited for you to come back and help us read William Carlos Williams. And some of you are here because you were at Penn and you missed the discovery of the power of the literary imagination. You missed it entirely. And of course, I'm thinking of you, Brett Perlman. Maybe Brett can pipe up, unmute yourself and pipe up. Brett went to that school at Penn that starts with a W, and he got a business education, and only much, 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 much later, partly through his daughter's admission to Penn and partly through visiting my classes. There he is. Brett this looks like the SS Enterprise or something like that. Is that right? Is that what
Star Trek Enterprise? I'm a big science fiction fan.
That's great. So Brett's a great example of someone who found us belatedly, but not belatedly, and who I think it's safe to say believes in the power and the value of caring about the imagination, of caring about many ways in which people think. And Brad, I just wanted to thank you publicly for your support of the Writers House, which has been very significant. So thank you.
My pleasure.
So thank you. So for whoever you are and whatever interest brought you to this event, I personally am grateful. We are grateful that you see the value in what we do to support creative young people. Goodness knows that kind of support is lacking by and large, at least in the US. So tonight's program will feature first Sophia DeRose, whom I will very briefly introduce in a minute. And Sophia's going to read a little bit of her work. And that will be followed by the amazing Carmen Maria Machado, who is going to read a little bit of her work. And following that, Jamie Lee is going to come back, and she'll be in conversation with one of our current students, Roanna Miller. And Roanna was recruited by Jamie Lee as part of this program that we're supporting tonight. And then after that, I will come back and I will lead a close reading of a poem by William Carlos Williams. And we're going to be doing that collaboratively. There are a few people, including someone we would call a ringer, Marjorie Perloff, the aforementioned Marjorie Perloff. We're going to do a close reading of a really famous Williams poem, and we hope you enjoy that. So first up is Sophia DeRose, who's a completely amazing person. She is a student at Penn. She's been in many of my classes. I've gotten to see how remarkable she is. And she is a writer. She's appeared in many literary magazines. And her first book of poetry, which I read a couple of years ago, I think it's called Losing Teeth, which was published by Shanti Press in 2019. And she's an undergraduate teaching assistant in my poetry class. A complete miracle, I think, and a regular at the Kelly Writers House, and most importantly, the mom of a pet pug, Midge, who has become, I don't know if Midge is around. Did Midge go into quarantine so she wouldn't bite your toes while you were, okay. Too bad you don't get to see the pug. But Sophia, I'm so excited to introduce you to all these friends of the Writers House and look forward to your reading. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Al, and thank you to everyone else who's here tonight. First, I want to talk a little bit about Kelly Writers House and how I came to be involved with Kelly Writers House and Penn more generally. I'm a senior studying English with a concentration in creative writing, and I always knew that I wanted to study English, but when I was younger, growing up in Florida, all I wanted was to desperately get out of Florida. So I thought New York City was where it was at, and I wanted to go to Columbia. And my single mother sacrificed a lot to send me to a summer creative writing program at Columbia when I was 16. And that is where I met the wonderful person, Kristen Martin. And she told me while teaching at Columbia in this creative writing program, she said, have you ever heard of the Kelly Writers House? And I was like, no, I have no idea what that is. And she gave me Jamie Lee's email. And so when I was 16, I emailed Jamie Lee and I was like, can I have more information about the Kelly Writers House? And we kept up a correspondence. And when it was time for me to apply to colleges, I realized that the Kelly Writers House was something that I didn't want to miss out on. I wanted to be involved with something like that. So obviously I did not go to Columbia. I went to Penn largely because of the Kelly Writers House. And I'm extremely thankful to both Kristen Martin and Jamie Lee, like every day, for that decision and that connection. Because the Kelly Writers House is truly, I'm not being paid to say this, I do work there, but it's truly such a blessing to me. It's offered me so many opportunities that I never thought I'd be blessed enough to have. It, like, growing up where I grew up with no family members who went to college and no knowledge of anything that happens in higher education or anything like that, I've been given so many opportunities and experiences through the Kelly Writers House that I genuinely never thought I would get to have. Like my freshman year at Penn, I met the poet Burnett Mayer. That's some, like, what high school me would have absolutely not believed that. So that was just a little spiel about Kelly Writers House because I truly do love it. I feel like I found people that will be my friends for life at the Kelly Writers House. I felt at home there when I was extremely homesick at Penn and needing a place to feel like home. And I'm just really blessed to be involved with such an amazing community. And yeah, so as Al mentioned, I have prepared a poem to read today. It's a new poem and it's entitled Hour in Which I Consider Hyperactivity and Hyperlinks. I refuse to procure connections, and I doubly refuse to use any procured connections. So my problem is networking, not working. I'm a very good worker. I've taken many classes. I've taken even more breaks, like breakdancing, breaking bones, broken in boneheaded questions like, why do people care about all these things I cannot even pronounce, like the Constitution or the letter S? I'm constantly angry that I can't control who looks at me, permanently fuming, perpetually fumigating, purposefully confusing my sense of self for the way others have languaged me into boldness. Alexa, be my pensieve. Remember the words algorithms of oppression. Tattle on me for sleep saying, Wi-Fi is a civil right. What I meant was there's a lot embedded in liberty, a lady's command to lie brightly, a man's right to a fried kingdom. Always wondered why kingdom and freedom rhyme, why queen doms are hard to come by. If you know them, tell them to give me a ring. I don't have a phone, so you figure out what I mean. Technology cannot be on your side if you haven't chosen one. Centricity sounds scientific, but so does goggles and anaglyphic. No one said this country wasn't a pentagon, octagon, dodecahedron. That's a lot of sides to choose from if you're unsure, unmoored, and unbothered. Buckminster Fuller said a triangle is the strongest shape. Makes me think there's a Buckminster Full and a Buckminster Fullest. Maybe a Buckminster Cubist and a Buckminster Nudist? Pointy shapes have always been confusing to me as someone who isn't straight. Circles are easier to appreciate, but who am I to know the structure of my own face? Consent is a four-letter word like uh-huh or nope. Terminally ill conditions, agree to them unread. Pass the words and the butter, please. Punch a cop, call that pork chop. Cut my finger off, call that generational sin. Forget the past tense of have, call that has been. I now pronounce myself in holy acrimony, in laconic love or chronic oversharing. I'm trying to learn new words to take the GRE, you see, but I don't even know what GRE means. Call that antonym of an acronym. I would love to listen to my internal hunger cues, but I crave stuff like sunlight and shadows, EBT cards are accepted by angels, but I, coincidentally, am not. Call that tornado don't. For a while, I thought my body was composing, like the actual opposite of decomposing, because I was constantly growing. I've since been told that's called knowing things. Separate my twin sister and I into different first grade rooms. Call that preparing us for the real world. Like a classroom isn't a part of the real world. Call that an identity crisis. I'd end this thing now if I believed in endings, but I think I believe more in spending money I don't have, ending stupid text messages, pretending I'm busy when I'm not, offending people with conspiracies like the tooth fairy is an allegory for anxiety dreams about your teeth falling out, recommending books and poems to people who don't ask, extending a hand to the self in the mirror who smiles when I disappear, like it's okay to prefer when I'm not here, tending to stare at the sun, hoping to see a reflection. It doesn't have to be mine. Anyone's would do but the moon. They're fighting off and on. Comprehending that I am alone with the knowledge that I am the only person who will really know who I am, how I feel, and fall apart. Thank you so much for listening.
Sophia,
I'm gonna pass. What?
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there are two ways for you to say that you enjoyed Sophia's reading. One is to put something in the chat, and the other is to hover your cursor if you're on a laptop or a desktop and go to the reactions on the far right and do a little reaction. I'm doing a heart right now, but I also want to do a thumbs up and an applause. So maybe you could applaud. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you so much,
everyone.
Marvelous. Fantastic. Sophia DeRose. You will hear much more from Sophia in the coming years and decades. It is a great pleasure for me now to introduce Carmen Machado. Most of you know of Carmen. Maybe most of you have read Carmen's work. Her best-selling memoir is called In the Dream House. And prior to that was the award-winning short story collection, which I read when I was first getting to know Carmen as a candidate at that time for a position at Penn. And boy, was I blown away by that short story collection. It's called Her Body and Other Parties. She has been a finalist for the National Book Award and a winner of the Bard Fiction Prize. And I'm not going to list all the prizes and awards, but another is the Lambda Literary Award for lesbian fiction, which is a major award. And we are so lucky. Carmen likes Philly, likes us, likes the Writers House, likes the creative writing program, and has become a beloved teacher in our program and is currently the Abrams Artist in Residence at the University of Pennsylvania. Carmen, thank you for doing this tonight, and I turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everybody. So I just wanted to say a couple of words about the Kelly Writers House before I read. So when I first moved to Philadelphia, I heard about the Kelly Writers House, and there was an event there. I believe it was Roxane Gay. No, it was even before Roxane Gay. I can't remember what the reading was, but I was new to the city and I was missing grad school where I'd come from, and I was missing readings and like a literary community. And someone was like, oh, you should go to the Kelly Writers House. They have events all the time. And so I wandered over there, and I found myself, I almost cried because it like gave me exactly this thing that I had been looking for since I had moved. And also it made me think, man, I really wish I had known a thing like this existed when I was in undergrad, because I would have like just chained myself to a chair and not let them kick me out if I had known a place like that existed. It's a really special space. This year, has been hard for a lot of reasons, but one of the hardest parts has been not being able to be on campus and not being able to be at the Kelly Writers House and like smell the good food when I walk in and like say hello to people and get to go to events in the way that we normally do. So yeah, I just really miss the Kelly Writers House. And I feel like it's a really special place that I don't think a lot of students have an opportunity to experience. Like outside of Penn. So it's kind of, it's just like a really special thing. And I really appreciate it and think it's really magical. And I don't know, I just have a lot of warm and tender feelings for it. And I miss everybody. I miss everyone so much. You have no idea. Sometimes I just walk to campus and I just walk around real sad, like. Okay, so I'm gonna read just the beginning of a short story that is unpublished called Open Up. When Ella was 13, her mother sat down to tell her with an alien tenderness that her dentist, Dr. Jenks, had just died on a trip abroad. He was killed by an elephant, her mother said, a bit of gossip she'd picked up from his now unemployed receptionist. This was how Ella learned that Dr. Jenks, who'd been cleaning her teeth since she was 2, had been an avid and accomplished big game hunter. If Ella had known this, she would not have subjected to his ministration so easily. She would not have let a killer's hands inside her mouth, or at the very least would have made a point to bite him as some measure of justice. Ella was not glad Dr. Jenks died, but she was glad she didn't have to see him anymore. There was something loosey-goosey about him that had never sit right with her. Once, while gesticulating wildly during a story about his sons, and in retrospect probably thinking distracting thoughts about an animal he planned to slaughter during an upcoming vacation, he'd accidentally stuck her cheek with a lidocaine needle, causing half her face to numb and droop. Which was bad enough, but when she'd accused him, he'd flat out denied it, as if her slurring was the result of a very unconcerning stroke. A few days later, when walking past his former office on her way to a Girl Scout meeting, Ella stared at the windows, half lidded with blinds, and thought about the felled elephant, a toppled wall of muscle and bone, once capable of memory and grief. Ella got the wildlife fact file cards in the mail, just like everyone else. It had skewered Dr. Jenks after the shot had struck it, shish kebab Dr. Edward Jenks DMD before dying of its own wounds. Ella imagined the tusk through Dr. Jenks' torso, slick with gore, his 2 loves, teeth, and killing exotic creatures together in his final moments, a dentist to the end. And so her mother started taking her to Dr. Allison Yu, who up until that fated big game hunt had been Dr. Jenks' primary local competitor. Ella came to the appointment with a nice thick copy of Little Women tucked under her arm. She'd always brought books to Dr. Jenks' office, and he'd always said exactly the same thing. Such a reader. The praise made her squirm with satisfaction, even though he'd never asked about the title specifically. Perhaps he privately believed that she was bringing the same book each time and didn't want to draw attention to the slowness of her progress. Ella did not know very much about Dr. Yu, except that she had a son in her grade, Alan. He was handsome and serene and moved very slowly like a panther who'd recently fed. He played lacrosse and trombone and was vegetarian. Ella had often considered trying to strike up a conversation with him, but she always found herself returning to questions about teeth, which was absurd. Her father was an engineer, and she didn't know anything about engineering, and there was no reason to believe that Alan was any different. After the hygienist completed the preliminary check, Dr. Yu entered the room, her baby blue mask hooked over her ears. She clipped a waxy bib around Ella's neck as she glanced at her file, which included a set of x-rays taken days before Dr. Jenks boarded his final flight to Zimbabwe. Ella tried to imagine what Dr. Yu was seeing in there. Ella's mouth had always been odd. Her body had only made 2 wisdom teeth instead of 4, and there were several baby teeth in her mouth with no permanent replacements behind them. She was a genetic anomaly, she'd informed her mother smugly. At the base of her mouth, below her tongue, there were 2 glistening bumps of bone and skin, which Dr. Jenks called mandibular tori. He'd assured her they were benign and wouldn't be any trouble until she was old and wearing dentures, which was sufficiently far in the future that Ella felt comforted by its remoteness. She didn't even ask if the dentures would have to be built around the bumps or if the bumps would be cut from her mouth. She figured when she'd entered her into her 80s, Dr. Jenks would be there with the appropriate information in hand. "Do you brush your teeth regularly?" Dr. Yu asked sternly. Ella nodded. "What about flossing?" A wisp of panic floated up Ella's body. She didn't like flossing, so she didn't do it. Still, she said, "Yes," and Dr. Yu nodded with satisfaction. She turned away. There was a jangle of metal instruments, and Dr. Yu pivoted back with a metal pick cocked in her hand. Open up, she said, and Ella responded. She loved opening up, and Dr. Yu smelled like herbal essences, shampoo. The hooked instrument dug into the tender gaps between Ella's teeth and gums, pulling and scraping at the enamel. Ella got a strange tingling sensation in her navel. It reminded her of when she broke her mother's favorite Garfield mug by dropping it too hard in the sink. When she tried to reassemble the large pieces together, the unglazed edges made a dry, granular scrape that set her bones buzzing. Wider, Dr. Yu said, and Ella opened her mouth so wide the corner of her mouth cracked and she felt a tinny sting. She wondered about Dr. Yu's position, staring into the cavern of her mouth. Did she ever get tired of pink, wiggly tongues, of imperfect teeth shiny with saliva? No cavities, she murmured, causing Ella's body to go warm with pleasure. But when she flossed, Ella's mouth went to metal. You lied, Dr. Yu said, with no levity. If you flossed regularly, your gums wouldn't bleed. You have to floss. If you don't, it will hurt your heart one day. This was so much terrible information, all at once, and at the heels of such a devastating scolding, Ella felt tears at her waterline. Dr. Yu told her to rinse. For the final step, the fluoride treatment, Dr. Yu didn't ask her what flavor she wanted, only pushed the curved foam pieces into Ella's mouth until the pink-flavored cream bubbled near the entrance to her throat. She gagged a little. Dr. Yu left the room and did not come back. The hygienist was the one who removed it all and hustled her out the door to meet her mother. Ella saw Dr. Yu twice a year through the end of high school, except for her 17th year, when she had one extra appointment to have her existing wisdom teeth removed. Ella's last memory before waking up with a mouthful of blood and cotton was Dr. Yu telling her that she was right. Alan was a very special boy. In her 20s, Ella saw another private practice dentist exactly one time. His office was dusty and full of horrors. On the wall was mounted a mural of inspirational text art. Ella had been suspicious of pithy slogans ever since she saw an exclusive TV interview with a serial killer who said he'd been finally motivated to murder by a stranger's t-shirt that said, "Don't let your dreams stay that way." This dentist talked too much. His breath smelled like the appointment had come on the heels of an afternoon nap. He tapped on his keyboard with his gloved hands before immediately sticking them back into Ella's mouth, and she shrieked in horror. Having written this long before COVID, I'm now fresh with horror over what I'm describing here. After that, she ignored his follow-up postcards, which misspelled her name anyway, and started going to a local dental school instead. In grad school, just before she dropped out, just after the discovery of Solo 9, Alan Yu messaged Ella on Facebook around 4 a.m. Ella wanted to pretend that she was asleep, that no one in their right mind was awake at that terrible hour, but she was so curious about his hey that she responded, "Hey yourself. Alan, you awake?" Ella, obviously. Alan, I was just sitting here. Alan, thinking about you. Alan, getting hard. Ella's fingers froze over the keyboard, partially from a surge of arousal, partially from confusion. Even when they'd seen each other with some regularity, they had at least shared one class a year for all of high school. She didn't even realize that Alan knew who she was precisely. She tried to remember the last time she'd seen him. Graduation? No, once afterwards, during her sophomore year of college. She'd run into him at an Applebee's over summer break and asked him how his mother's dental practice was faring. Had he been nursing an extremely subtle crush on her ever since then? Alan, are you? Ella, hard? Alan, wet. Ella, yes. Alan, maybe we can do something about it. Alan, you want to come over? Alan, I'm at my mom's place. Ella realized he thought she was at home. The problem was she was kind of wet by that point, but hundreds of miles away. I live in DC now, not near you, frowny face. Could we talk on the phone? He never responded, and 20 minutes later, when Ella reconciled the fact that he never would, she got herself off before finally falling asleep. A few weeks later, she dropped out of school. She wasn't the only one. Half the class claimed an existential crisis stemming from Solo 9, and the program was gutted almost overnight. but Ella was pretty sure she would have left anyway. She'd been thinking that reliable medical insurance was not worth the price of higher education for as long as she could remember. That is the end of the excerpt that I'm reading.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you so much. So folks, you have your chat to say thank you, and you can also click reactions. There's my reaction and another one. Carmen, thank you for spending time with us tonight. So that's unpublished. Is it part of a collection or part of a longer piece?
It is part of a book that I'm working on. So Solo 9 is actually I should have mentioned before I started, but is a comet that's appeared in the sky that no one really knows anything about and is creating a lot of chaos. So like every story in this book has like people being affected by the presence of this comet.
Can you just share the titles of 2 of the courses that you teach so people have a sense of what is now available in our our creative writing program?
Well, in the spring, I am teaching, and suddenly I'm trying to remember the exact names of my courses, but I'm teaching the art of no, I'm not doing the art of haunting. I'm doing an introduction to creative nonfiction. So like we're covering a lot of different like memoir and art writing and things like that. And then I'm also doing suspense, mystery, and horror. So we're talking about the art of suspense and thinking about those genres. So those are the spring classes.
And safe to say that undergraduate writers are really interested in the horror genre.
Yeah, well, I personally believe that horror, suspense, and mystery are like actually the foundational genres for just like good writing in general, even when you're not writing those genres like in the end. So yeah, if you are interested, please sign up for my class. I'm really excited to meet you.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. So I'm going to turn to Jamie Lee JOSSELYN now. But before I introduce Jamie Lee, I wanted you to meet 2 people you probably already know. Zach has no idea what I'm doing here, so he's going to wing it. First is Jessica Lowenthal, whose camera is off, and I'm so sorry, Jessica. There you are. Jessica is the longtime director of the Kelly Writers House. Just to be clear, I'm the faculty director. And so I just sort of swan around, but it's Jessica Lowenthal who does so much of the work and leads the organization. So Jessica, thank you so much for all you do and what care you take of this community. So that's Jessica. And I want you also to meet Andrew Beal, he wears a bunch of hats, but the one that's I think significant tonight is he's the director of development for the Writers House. And he is the person who coordinates all our efforts to support our programs. So I'm just going to say that he is very easy to reach, and that if you have an interest in supporting some of our programs, he's the person to talk to. So just get in touch, or you can get in touch with me and I can put you in touch with him. So thank you for your efforts, Andrew, so much, especially for coordinating tonight's program. So I'm now going to turn to Jamie Lee JOSSELYN, who is the Associate Director for Recruitment. I mean, imagine this. Sorry, Jamie Lee, I always say this. Imagine we have in our organization, I think unlike any other organization that I know of, literary organization or House for Writers at a university, we have our own person who's you also teach, but whose main job is to find new students before they matriculate. Just a remarkable thing. You're part of the creative writing program, a member of the faculty. You teach courses that everybody raves about, no joke. On a scale of 4.0, you're typically a 4.0 teacher. Students love your courses. And you also created a few years ago the summer workshop for young writers at the Kelly Writers House, which happens typically in July, and you are the director of that summer workshop. You've done a lot of your own publishing, and I hope that in your opening words, you will say something about your podcast so that people can tune into it because it's marvelous. And so Jamie Lee is going to take over now for a few minutes. She is going to interview Roanna Miller about what it's like to be recruited to come to Penn, so as a writer. So Jamie Lee, thank you very much.
Thank you, Al. Thanks, everybody. It is so nice to see all of you in the chat and see all of your faces. I was noticing when people were saying, oh, if only there had been a Writers House when I was an undergrad. I'm here from adulthood to tell you it was great to have a Writers House when I was an undergrad at Penn. I graduated from Penn in 2005. Al was my advisor. I hung out at the Writers House more than I hung out anywhere. Probably even more sometimes than like the apartments I rented near campus. The Writers House was my default. So I was fortunate to be able to stick around after I graduated. And here I am all these years later, from South Philly tonight. But, I was actually very briefly at the Writers House today. I was on campus filming a brief video for my class, which is called Sports Narratives. I saw a little shout out to Sports Narratives in the chat there. I actually recorded a video on campus at Franklin Field for Sports Narratives. So it was very cool. And that class, which is about writing about sports and writing around sports and writing through sports and using sports to write about other things in our lives, that kind of came about because that's something I think about a lot, that I really love. And I've gotten, as a staff member and creative writing faculty person, I've gotten to also kind of pursue a few things like that I care about a lot and love a lot. And so now I will mention the podcast that Al told me to mention, which is called Dead Parents Society, not Dead Poets Society, Dead Parents Society. And that's a podcast that I host where I invite other writers who've written about the loss of a parent at a young age to come and share a piece of their writing, and then we talk about it. And that is also, something that has been important for me and close to me for a long time, because that's an experience I had as a kid and something I've written a lot about. So everything from sports to Dead Parent Society to eating food at the Writers House to making my best friends at the Writers House. That's what you need to know about me. But enough about me. I want you all to meet Roanna Miller, who I'm sure will pop up on the screen in just a moment. Roanna, you'll hear more about her in a minute, but when we started doing student recruitment, it first started to happen organically because everybody knew Al, and everybody kind of who was applying to Penn, who knew someone who knew Al, introduced themselves to him. And I was Al's assistant at that time. I'm thinking about, back in 2005, 2006, et cetera, et cetera. After a little while, I started thinking, what if we really, what if instead of waiting for people to come to us, what if we went looking for the best student writers in the country? And so that's what we've been doing. We've formed relationships with high schools and writing programs. We've developed programs like our online book group in the summer, which I know some of you were part of. And maybe you just got a thrill hearing from Carmen Machado, since we read her work in the online book group over the summer. And of course, the summer workshop for young writers. So we kind of took the idea of student writers being introduced to us, often through a contact to Al or the Writers House, and we've flipped it. We've been proactive rather than just reactive. There's probably a sports metaphor in there, right? But anyway, Roanna, hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you through Zoom. Where are you Zooming from?
I am in Philadelphia in a basement. My pod is very careful about quarantine and safety, and I went home for Thanksgiving. And so I am in semi-isolation right now.
Got it. Good. You're playing by the rules. You're an example for all of us. So you're a member of the class of 2022. And so we're doing this little interview convo because we just want everyone who's watching, alumni, parents of current students, parents of fingers crossed future students, and those prospective students themselves. We just want everybody to kind of get a sense of what it's like to become a member of the Writers House community after being in touch with us as a prospective student. So I'm going to, just so everybody knows, I'm going to chat with Roanna for a couple of more minutes, but if anybody has questions for her as we chat, we might have a minute or two to answer one or two questions. So feel free to drop a question in the chat if you have one for her. But Roanna, let's start at the beginning. Why don't you tell us, where you went to high school and how did you first start writing? When did you first start writing?
Okay. I went to the Beacon School. It's a public high school in New York. And I can't really pinpoint a moment when I first started writing. I feel like I've been writing in some capacity forever, but I think that I started writing seriously when I was 12. When I was 5 or 6, I promised myself that I was going to publish a book by the time that I graduated from high school. That did not happen. I thought that the way to do that would be by writing a book. And then it would be brilliant. And then it would get published. But the hard part was going to be writing it. And so I started writing my first book when I was 12 years old. That was when I thought I was going to make it a reality. And so that book did not get published. The next book that I wrote did not get published either. I came to Penn, and I have since written book number 3. And I was incredibly lucky to find a mentor in a Penn professor, Nova Ransuma. And I wrote this book. I started it in her YA fiction class, and I drafted most of it in an independent study with her last year. And I'm currently in the process of querying it. And I don't know if I will ever be published, but I am really, really proud of the work that I have done and how much I've improved, and how much I've learned. And I think that's probably the number one thing I am most proud of about who I am. Just the work that I have put into making my novel writing better.
Amazing. Book 3. That's incredible. I'm going to rewind a little bit and go back in time, just to kind of give everybody a sense of how we all came to know each other. And I was thinking about this in kind of preparing for this event today. How did you, back when you were in high school, how did you find out about the Writers House?
My creative writing teacher knew you. I remember this day very clearly. I was in my sophomore year creative writing class. I think that it was around late May. And my creative writing teacher used a page of prompts from the KWH website to do an exercise with us. I think that they were 6-word short stories. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of her lesson, she said, "Oh, and if any of you were thinking about studying creative writing seriously in college, this is from the Kelly Writers House. I met somebody there. I might have a contact there. Let me know if you're interested."
That's amazing. So those were the 6-word memoirs. Yes. We actually have a chair in the Arts Cafe of the Writers House that has a collage of Writers House written 6-word memoirs, all decoupage to the chair. So your teacher was Sarah Fink, and she was actually connected to us through Julie Merberg, who is an alum who I believe might be out there in the Zoom somewhere tonight. And that is just one way that we make these connections. Otherwise, but I feel like I remember being connected to you through that, through your teacher in your school, but I think you were also independently emailing with both me and with Al. And so I feel like we were connected to you many times over, but that might've just been your your passion at the time. And it's so interesting for me, having been doing this for all these years, because there's so many ways that students connect with us. Sometimes it's because I visit their school. Sometimes it's through an alum who introduces me to a teacher like yours. But I've also met people who find us through our online book group, or through ModPo, or through Googling university writing programs. One of the students who did our online book group a few years ago somehow found out about the Writers House through Instagram. Great, cool, do it. Thanks, Instagram. But what I remember about you, Roanna, was just how sincere and how passionate you were about your own work, but also about Penn and about your next step, where you were going to be college-wise. What was your college search like otherwise?
Penn was the first school that I researched in depth, and that was because of the Kelly Writers House. Because I found out about the Writers House before I officially researched colleges, I just fell into learning more about Penn. And I applied here ED. To be honest, Penn was, the way that my list was ranked, Penn was here, and then everything else. I thought that there were a lot of schools where I would have been happy, but Penn, I felt very, very strongly that Penn was the right place for me. And so I felt that way. I really felt that way from the beginning. I toured Penn when I was a junior. I spoke with you in person at the Writers House on the little wooden table upstairs.
I was just going to say, I remember we sat on the second floor in the library at the table, which is so funny because, I have a lot of these meetings, but I always remember where. Sometimes I'm on the green couch, sometimes, we're by the fireplace, but I remember with you, we were in the library. Usually it's just like, where can we get a free spot, basically. But yes, I remember that. And I don't know, speaking of the Writers House, maybe could you just, in this moment, maybe give us like a different memory from your student days? What's a favorite like snapshot memory of the Writers House for you when you just think of a good time there?
There are moments when I'm there just hanging out that are great memories. Yeah. And there are moments when I'm on shift. Also, I work there. I work as a program assistant at the Writers House that I really love. One moment that really stands out to me, in my freshman year, I photographed the KWH programs pretty regularly. Mm-hmm. And there was a program with the poet Meg Day where I cannot remember another reading that I have felt that powerfully impacted by. And to get to photograph it, I got to be so close to the stage. I got to be like really basking in how fantastic Meg Day was. Also introducing her was introducing them was a student in a class that I was also taking, who I didn't know that well at the time, and I know better now. And her name is Lauren. And she, in addition to introducing Meg Day, she read an excerpt of her own writing. And it was a side of her that I had not seen in the class before. And it was just really, really cool to get to know her in a way that I did not before. And then to hear Meg Day speak. It was a really, really wonderful meeting of seeing people who I already knew, but from different angles, and seeing people who I did not know and was just overwhelmed by. Meg Day occupied that room like nobody I've ever seen.
Yeah, I love that. What you're getting at there is something I talk about a lot, actually, when I meet with prospective students or visit schools, which is the Writers House is on one hand about meeting your favorite writers, but kind of with all due respect to Meg Day and our favorite writers who we've met at the Writers House, I would say it's sometimes even more about actually the other students, your colleagues, your friends, your buddies, your collaborators, you know, so that I can see why that is a memory that stands out to you, because like it was all happening there. Plus there was probably some delicious food at the event too. So I might just ask one more thing for now. I need you to tell us about WordCamp. Will you tell us about WordCamp?
There is very little that I love more than talking about WordCamp. WordCamp, last year, I won the Kelly Writers House Carey Prize, which goes toward funding a student design program. And this was last spring 2020, aka right after we went into lockdown. And I proposed an online summer camp, an online creative writing summer camp for kids in elementary and middle school, because I was hoping to target 3 different groups of people: kids who had all their camps canceled and were sad and needed something creative and interesting to occupy them that worked well with the online format, because there's just so much that's out there targeted for kids that does not adapt so well online. Mm-hmm. I wanted to help parents who were overwhelmed by having to juggle work and kids. And I also wanted to do something for Penn students who were losing jobs and internship opportunities all the time. And there were not that many opportunities for paid work. And so that was what we did with the Carey Prize grant. We hired 6 Penn students to teach creative writing classes, 2 for elementary schoolers and 4 for middle schoolers. We asked them to propose whatever classes they were most passionate about teaching. And there were so many incredible applications. The classes that we ended up going with were nature writing for elementary schoolers, comedy writing for elementary schoolers. And then for the middle school group, we had short story, flash memoir, mythology, and dystopian fiction. And they were all so good. Like, some of these classes, I wish that I could go back in time to when I was that age, because this is the kind of thing that I would have just absolutely lost it over to have a very, very specific writing education experience. Because I think that also is a niche that needed to be filled for kids. I think that a lot of people assume that kids don't know what they want to learn. And so there aren't really specific classes for kids who know, I've been reading the Percy Jackson books over and over again. I want to know the specifics of how to write mythology. Mm-hmm. And those were the 10 kids who were in that class. And so what if it's 10 kids? We brought those 10 kids together and they had a great time. And it really, really seemed at the end of the program like the kids had a fantastic experience. I was there on the last day. I heard all of the kids' readings. The way the camp was structured, it was a 4-day-a-week program. They met an hour every day, and then they had the opportunity to either work on their pieces outside of class or not, just depending on how much commitment they wanted to do, because we wanted the camp to be flexible. And then 3 days were for lessons and discussions and workshopping. And then the 4th day was for sharing. And I went to the 4th day for all the classes. And the kids they did great work, but what was more important to me was the sense of community that there was in all the virtual classrooms. There were a lot of kids from the same areas of the country, but there were also a lot of kids who were not. And it was really, really wonderful to see them form connections and support each other's work and comment in the chat. Ooh, so suspenseful. Great wording. Like, I thought that kind of support was fantastic. And it just brought me so much joy to watch that happen.
I love that. It is so clear to all of us that you brought the Writers House to those kids last summer, and there was so much interest in it. And I'm so glad that you kept that you had all of the workshops, that they were, I think 10 people is the perfect size for something like that. It was just fantastic. So thanks for that, Roanna, and thanks for everything. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Roanna and Jamie Lee. Thank you both so much. Put
Thank
up
you.
your applause, everybody, and your hearts and comments in the chat. Thank you both very much. And now we are going to turn to a collaborative close reading of a poem. And what I'm going to do, so stick around, you might get involved in this thing. I'm going to put a link in the chat to a poem by William Carlos Williams. It's called Between Walls. And if you click on that link, here it is again, you'll see a text of the poem. Now, I have contacted a few people who are going to help me do a collaborative close reading of this poem. So I am going to first establish that they are here and ask that, that Zach identify those folks, have them unmute and show up on the screen. First of all, Nina Friend is going to do this, and I think Nina is still here. Right, Nina? Are you around? Hey, Nina, and you look at this background. You're at the Writers House. Oh my goodness. So Nina's going to take a phrase. And then I've asked Judy Norman, who was supposed to join us from Cambodia, and I'm not sure that Judy is here. Judy, if you're here, will you unmute and join us? And I think I didn't see Judy's name, so her connection from Phnom Penh might be a little shaky. Okay, she's not here. But I know that Augusta Greenbaum is here. Augusta, will you unmute and say hello?
Hi.
Hi, Augusta. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm going to give you a couple of phrases. All right, you're all right with that? Okay, good. David and Daniel Biro, did you guys make it tonight? I thought you were going to be coming. There you are. Hey guys, I'm going to assign you a part, and Zach's doing a great job of putting everybody in the screen. I'm not sure how many of us he can get there. And then my buddy Eric Carlin, who is in San Diego currently. I hope Eric will. There he is. Hey buddy, is your little Eliana going to join us for this, or she decided no poems?
I can go get her. Maybe
Okay.
there's more hope for her for poetry than me.
All right. Good. Hi, Eric.
Upset I'm not in Jamie Lee's class.
And then Caroline Rothstein is going to help us do this. Caroline, I've got literally one word for you in this poem, so go for it.
Okay.
Yeah. Following that will be Marjorie Perloff, whom we met at the beginning. And Marjorie is what we call a ringer. She's very eminent poetry critic and loves William Carlos Williams, and actually loves this poem, as it turns out, as well. So these are our interlocutors. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have Bill Williams himself read the poem from our Penn Sound archive, and I'm going to play the audio only. For the rest of you, I'm putting once again a link to the text. All right, and so I'm going to hear Bill Williams read it. We're all going to. Then I'm going to read it again and assign the parts to these folks, and we're going to make quick work of this poem. It's a very interesting poem. So here's Bill Williams from the Penn Sound archive performing. Late in his life, he'd already suffered, I believe, one stroke, and you're going to hear his reading voice is somewhat compromised by that stroke, but it is a famous recording because of the way that he ends it. So it's called Between Walls, and here it is.
Between walls, the back wings of the hospital, where nothing will grow, lie cinders in which shine the broken pieces of a green bottle.
All right, that's Bill Williams. All right, so Nina Friend, when we go back through the poem, you've got the title Between Walls, and you're also got to be responsible for the fact that the poem seems to begin from the title. The title seems to be part of the text of the poem. All right, Augusta, you have the back wings of the hospital. That's what you've got. And when I say you've got it, it means you're going to help us just talk through it, all right? Okay. Eric Carlin and Eliana. Oh, Eric's still out getting Eliana. Maybe Eliana is refusing to participate. So Eric's going to have sorry, I skipped Daniel and David. Daniel and David are going to have Where Nothing Will Grow. All right, you guys have Where Nothing Will Grow. All right, Eric's going to have Lie Cinders, very difficult. Caroline Rothstein, you have Shine. Hey, Eric and Eliana. Hi, Eliana. How are you, sweetie? Eric, you have Lie Cinders.
Lie Cinders?
It's really hard, but you'll get there in a minute. Caroline, you have Shine. And Marjorie kind of has the hard part. Marjorie's got Broken Pieces, well, or Broken Pieces of a Green Bottle, that whole fragmentation thing that's going on at the end. So Broken Pieces, Marjorie, but also Green Bottle, because there's some art history in there, and there's some modernist art in there that we'll want to talk about. Okay, so you ready for this? Here's Bill Williams one more time. Nina, you'll start as soon as we're done hearing Bill, and here he is. No, I seem to have eliminated him, but that's all right. I'll read it. Between walls, the back wings of the hospital, where nothing will grow, lie cinders in which shine the broken pieces of a green bottle. Okay, Nina, Between Walls, what's going on there?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Al, for having me.
Hi, Nina.
I think that Between Walls is kind of evoking a forgotten place, maybe where people aren't looking, or a place that isn't obvious, but where
Can you
beautiful...
imagine such a space, Nina? I mean, help us imagine a space between walls. It's a pretty unusual phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about a place that is dark and doesn't have a lot of light, and where people can't really see a lot, but where there's potential for something beautiful to still grow.
Oh, you're doing a whole reading of the poem. You're doing your Nina Friend thing. Yes, good, thank you. And it is a little unusual to think about a space defined by it being between walls. That is not a typical, this very unusual approach to the space. Thank you, Nina. We'll get back to you. So, Augusta, the back wings of the hospital, this is a particular place, right? I mean, we've all been to complex modern hospitals. What is it about hospitals and wings? What's going on? What kind of space is this?
So I'm picturing this place as an undesirable location. It's kind of this dead space. And I'm thinking about the background, how William Carlos Williams was a doctor and how he delivered babies. So you could kind of picture him walking here maybe between rounds, and the difference between the life-giving source of the hospital, where people go for life-saving treatment, and yet there's this kind of forgotten space that maybe there is no life there. Who knows? Yeah, so back wings is a very thick phrase. I mean, it refers architecturally or by design to something. You know, I mean, I don't know anything about your house, Augusta. I haven't been there, but I imagine you would never say, I'm just guessing, you wouldn't never say, I'll meet you in the back wings of our house. Why not? Why wouldn't you? And why is there a back wing of the hospital? And wing, such an interesting word. Thinking about wings, like, well, first when you say like the back wing of the hospital, I'm picturing it in this kind of like as a barely acknowledged place, maybe a part of industrial life, kind of, or a post-industrial society. But also the word wing itself could be something that symbolizes hope. You could think of like the wings of a bird, or even just like the wings of a poem. Mm-hmm. And hospital, I think we should say something about hospital. It's a word that's very current. There's a lot of hospitaling going on right now. And you mentioned that Williams is a doctor. So what is it about a hospital, and what is it about back wings of a hospital? Just riff a little bit, Augusta. I've seen you do this in class. You're brilliant. I'm sure. So I'm thinking about maybe a place behind the hospital. So it's a place that maybe he's passing every day on these rounds. It's kind of a familiar part of his routine. but maybe something that he hasn't kind of stopped to think about and look through and observe, like what's happening there, what kind of objects are in this back wing, until, you know, kind of he rushes past it. But it's kind of, it could be a confined space that's perhaps all too ignored by too many people. And you can think of so many places like behind public buildings, or you're all familiar with like spaces, like I know back in the city behind my office, like there's just one space, you just kind of walk past it every day.
Right. So quick, before we turn to Daniel and David, Nina, now we have between walls, the back wings of the hospital. So you put those two together. First of all, I was going to ask you to comment on why a poem could have a title that leads directly into the text.
It's interesting because I think in the recording that you played for us, he has a little bit longer of a space between walls and the back wings than I was anticipating.
Yeah, let's hear it for 1 sec. Here it goes. I did find it.
Between walls, the back wings of the hospital.
Does that sound like a title and a beginning of a poem, or a title that's part of the poem?
I think if you interpret the title to be part of the poem, then it sounds like a title that's part of a poem. But if you don't, then it sounds like a title.
Oh, I love that reference, a reference to the radical openness of what Williams is trying to do. So put the two together before we turn to Daniel and David. Between walls, the back wings of the hospital. So you already talked about it as a desolate space, and then Augusta added a little more desolation to it. So what do we have? Can you design it? Can you describe it physically? This is a tough question, but I know you can do it.
The back wings of the hospital as being between the walls, as being like the space that the rest of the poem takes place in.
Okay, let me try something else. Imagine that between walls are defined or described by the back wings. Between walls are, or between walls we find the back wings. Between walls are delineated by the back wings. Does that make sense? You're nodding because I said it. Yeah, sorry, that was not a good teacherly moment on my part. I was leading you. Good, both of you, Augusta and Nina, are talking about this almost unplanned space that's random and abandoned. Okay, Daniel and David, where nothing will grow.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Daniel.
Okay. So the first thing that came to me was just a place devoid of life, and something, you know, that could literally be a place where people die. In the last line, it was just talking about a hospital, and a hospital is obviously where people die. Not always. Not always, you're right. But it could mean, you know, the place where people die, where life does not grow, the antithesis of life and growth, and, you know, in a more figurative sense, just, you know, a very lackluster place, a place where nothing happens, well, I wouldn't say unimportant, because obviously people dying is important, but yeah, I think devoid of life is what first came to me.
David, you know something about hospitals.
Yeah,
so, you know, your son is pointing out a paradox here. You know, hospitals are places, and I think Augusta or Nina or both of them said this, hospitals are places where a doctor like Williams is trying to save lives or make lives better, but he also reckons with the fact that there's a lot of death in hospitals.
Yeah, I mean, there is kind of a sort of similarity between this place where things are not growing as they should be growing, and in the hospital people are sick and they are not doing as they should be doing. So I kind of feel like it sort of reflects the not just that within this hospital space there's this separate sort of unimportant space, but that it sort of reflects what's going on in the hospital.
And both of you, Daniel and David, you're doing the right thing. Don't take this as a chastising. You are assuming you're going right to the metaphor of where nothing will grow, having to do with life and death in the hospital. But if Williams is literally describing this godforsaken place at the back of the hospital, he's literally saying nothing is growing. There's no weeds, there's no flowers, there's no plants, there's no trees.
Which means no light.
No greenery.
No, possibly no light, Daniel.
Yeah.
Yet possibly no light. Between walls, the back wings of the hospital where nothing will grow. So before we turn to Eric and Eliana, nothing is a big, powerful word here, Daniel. What does nothing mean?
What does nothing mean?
Yeah, I know. It's a profound question.
Nothing means that. What does nothing mean? Nothing means that I guess that, you know, other than William Carlos Williams, nobody is looking. Nothing is happening. There's no signs of life. I keep jumping to the word nothing to describe nothing, but
yeah. Well, I don't, Marjorie and I haven't prepared this, but I have a feeling that when we get to Marjorie at the end, she's going to say something about the modern idea that Williams really loved, which is he's going to find in a godforsaken place, in ugliness, some kind of life, right? And so he loved the challenge. Somebody said, well, there's nothing here. And he will stare and stare and look and pay attention until he finds something. So nothing is a thing where nothing will grow, because Eric and Eliana are just about to tell us what in fact is there, even though, as he'll tell us, it's cinders, it's not nothing, right? So David, did you want to say one more thing from the point of view of medicine, of doctoring? This is a very relevant poem to our circumstance today. Williams is wandering around a hospital and he's found this place this abandoned place where he's contemplating his work, his life as a doctor. Does this resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, you know, it could be depressing to be working sometimes all day long with sick people, with people who are, you know, in pain, whatnot. And so it's probably not uncommon to want to find within that kind of desolate space something positive, something,
right.
Yeah.
Right. I think Williams, the doctor speaker of this poem, could be said to be burned out, which is a phrase that we would use these days with doctors. And that's a pun on cinders, of course. Thank you. Eric, lie cinders. You've got two difficult words. Between walls, the back wings of the hospital where nothing will grow, lie cinders. Do you want to take lie first? What's going on there? You've got to unmute though. You've got to unmute. There you are. Good.
Yep. Here I am. Say hi.
Hi, Eliana.
So for lie, the first thing I thought of when I read that, yes, you can have more bread. The first thing I thought of with lie is like kind of lying in wait. There's like a sense of anticipation that there's that I think William Carlos Williams is building up to here. Here you go. And if I can pivot the cinders, then I would say that like what's lying in wait is not the cinders literally, you know, in their current black form, but cinders by nature, you know, I think they provide a sense of hope, right? There's this potential to be illuminated and sparked, and that's what's lying in wait.
Oh, so you're anticipating that these somehow among these cinders, which are residue of burning, something shines, which is what Caroline's going to talk about. But cinders otherwise are, as I say, what's left after burning. which is possibly
But they also have the potential to burn again.
I guess, yeah. I guess. I mean, there are only two ways we could get cinders in this situation. Bill Friend.
Sometimes for things to get better, they have to get worse. Sometimes you have to burn it down to build it back up.
Yeah, but unmetaphorically, Bill Friend. How do we get cinders in this space in the back of the hospital? There's only two ways I can think of. Remember, this is an old building from the 19th.
Right. One way is the garbage, right, from the exhaust of the burning of the fuel to heat the hospital.
And the fuel would have been coal.
Mm-hmm.
So these are coal cinders. And there's something even more depressing than that.
Yes, perhaps a body.
Possibly, and I don't know if I haven't read the scholarship on this poem, but possibly this is what happens after cremation. This is the cinders of death. Possibly. Thank you, Eric and Eliana. Yeah, go ahead.
That's a good question, though. But don't you find this actually very optimistic? And
yeah, we're about to get there.
Okay.
I thought that this part in those lines are almost like a turning point in the poem towards optimism the rest of the way.
Yeah, and Daniel suggested that before by saying that nothing is there is no such thing as a nothing, where nothing will grow. In fact, there is something, and the something is cinders, in which Caroline Rothstein, in which shine.
Yeah,
what shines is what Marjorie Perloff is going to tell us about. But we've got this turning point word shines. Take it away.
So of the 4 Post-its I've been scribbling on throughout all of this, the second one is our turning point Post-it. So folks really set me up for that one well. So before talking about the turning point, which I think is critical, and that's definitely, I think, a really good word to use, shine is a verb and also a noun. In this case, it's a verb and it's doing a lot of work and it's positioning itself as that turning point. And I think it's juxtaposed to nothing, especially after Daniel gave that wonderful breakdown of nothing. I think that then shine comes into conversation with that, and obviously the cinders. But I think it is useful to think about the many ways that shine operates as a word, to know that in this case, it is a verb, but it can also be these other things. So it's like got these layers going on. And then, so back to the turning point piece, it foreshadows that something is going to come. It is the linking point. And if we use we talked about, some folks were talking about death and grief earlier. There's a phrase in grief and loss work called linking object, where where like an object of someone who has died can become like a physical link to feeling their essence in missing them and mourning them. And so I think shine is not just a turning point, it's also like a linking object between that which seems nothing and those cinders. And then it elevates those cinders from the burning down to the possibility and the anticipation of something.
That's so well said. And we're going to turn to Marjorie for the last couple of lines here, but I want to set it up by imagining the story. And Williams would not have liked this because he was not, he made a condensed piece of art here so that we wouldn't tell stories. But the story is something like, boy, am I burned out. I went back to a spot where there's nothing to indicate life, and I stayed there long enough because I am a modernist. I am a modern artist. And I looked and I looked and I looked, and instead of just seeing the cinders and other indications of death, if I just look hard enough, something would shine and indicate life. That life will come back. And what shines is, Marjorie Perloff, the broken pieces, not a whole bottle, but pieces of a green bottle. What would you like to say about this, Marjorie? And thank you in advance.
Well, I take it much more just literally and what shall I say, not so grandiosely as I think you're suggesting here. The doctor is coming out of the hospital. The back between walls, The back wings are between walls. I have this experience all the time. You go to the typical hospital. If you go out the back door to the parking lot, there's no grass. They haven't planted flowers or anything. It's often very dirty. There's a lot of trash around. That's where the trash is kept, where the various things are kept. So the back wings, but they're wings, which already suggests something else, of the hospital, where nothing will grow. So there's no grass. But just when you think there isn't anything and it's so ugly and dirty, it isn't anything terrible. It's just what life is like every day. From the back door, that's the kind of thing you would see. And it's very carefully described. The walls of the back wings of a large hospital, you come into the back and you look on the ground and you think, oh boy, it's really pretty tawdry here. And then you will grow lie, that wonderful line that has 3 verbs. And of course, you have all the uneven couplets, long line, short line, and every word counts. So you get 3 verbs in a row: will, grow, lie. And what? Cinders. Well, there's probably been trash and it's been burning, so there's cinders. And so you think there's nothing, in which shine, and there's no green grass, but there's a green bottle. There are pieces of a green bottle. And as hideous as that is, most of us would think when you see broken bottle, lying there among the cinders, that's very ugly. But he transforms it. It's a little epiphany. So instead of green grass, you've got a green bottle. And I guess you wanted me to talk about the bottle in relation to, I don't know, fellow artists like Juan Gris, still lives of bottles. But very frankly, if you hadn't said that, I wouldn't think of that at all.
Well, what about
you had me think of it, but I don't think it has to be that at all. I think it's the difference between nature and culture. In other words, there's no grass, there's nothing growing. Instead, they're just man-made things, broken man-made things. And what is uglier than pieces of a green? It's some old wine bottle that some drunk has dropped, or who knows what it is. But even they shine. So there's a way of saying, even in the ugliest places, even out of what seems just hopeless, something can be born. But I don't think it has anything necessarily to do with the life or death inside the hospital. It's just the way it is. That's how I see it.
Thank you, Marjorie. And of course, implicit in what you're saying, or maybe explicit in what you're saying, is that Williams was looking for a way to find some kind of modified beauty, not natural, artificial beauty, finding beauty.
I don't think he's looking for it. The difference is, I don't think he's looking for it. It just happens.
Well, he has to see it because he sees the shining. He will see it. If he, so nothing will grow, but no, something will grow. Something will come of it. Snaps for everybody. Nina, Augusta, Caroline, Eric, Daniel, and David, and Marjorie, thank you all. Thank you all so much for participating in this. This is kind of what we do at the Writers House. We pick a poem and we sit around and talk about it. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I want to thank everybody who has or will contribute to our Student Recruitment Fund. Roanna, you are just an inspiration. We're so glad that you decided to come to Penn. And of course, Carmen and Sophia, marvelous reading tonight. Thank you, Andrew Beal. And Zach Gardner, will you appear and take a bow for doing all the tech? Let's see what happens when Zach shows up. He's probably not wanting to show up. There he is.
And thank you, Al.
Oh, thank you, Marjorie. And it's good to see you. During
give a hand for Al.
Thank you. During somebody, I think Sophia's reading, she mentioned Alexa, right? And as soon as she did, my Alexa started to talk to me. It was what we call literature made real. Thank you all, and good luck to those of you who are candidates for Penn admission. We believe in you. Let's hope the admissions department believes in you. Daniel, you've got a big smile on your face. Best of luck to you and everyone. Nina and Bill, thanks for joining us. Augusta, so good to see you. And I wish you all a good night, and come and join us for any other Writers House program. We would love to see you again. Now you're going to click the red button that says leave and go on with your evening. Thanks again.